Hello, good evening. This is the Supporting the Local Economy Policy Committee. And as usual, we're going to ask people to mute the microphones and make sure camera is on. And the meeting is broadcast for public viewing, so welcome to anybody who is watching in. I'm Councillor Steve Parish and I'll be chairing the meeting, and due to the current epidemic, or pandemic now, the meeting is being held on this not very convenient way, but we're getting used to it, and it's going to be broadcast live to the public in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020 section 78. Members of the committee in attendance this evening are, or at least one or two, still trying to get into the meeting on Teams, but there's myself, Councillor Barr, Councillor Bate, I think Councillor Buckley is trying to get in, Councillor Froggatt, Councillor Hannon and Councillor Purnell.
Councillor Abbey's on phone, dialing.
And Councillor Abbey trying to get on the phone. Okay, thank you very much, folks. We've got various officers and guests with us this evening. David Bowyer is the Director of Environment and Transport. Steve Park, the Director of Growth. Steve Hunter, who's the Transport for Warrington Service Manager. Eleanor Blackburn, Head of Strategic Partnerships and Commissioning. And our special guest tonight, Stephen Fitzsimons, who's the Chief Executive of the Warrington Chamber of Commerce. So welcome to you all. Have we had any apologies? I'm asking Chris Oliver, our officer in charge.
Sorry,
here.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, so we've had apologies from Councillor Tony Williams.
Thank you. Members will be familiar with the Code of Conduct, item 2 on the agenda. Does anybody need to declare any interests? Obviously, if you suddenly come across something that you need to disclose, just tell me when we come to that item. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting held 5th of October 2020. I wasn't a member of the committee then, so could somebody who was there and present, I propose we accept the minutes. I shall start going down the list to see who might be there and might propose them as a correct record.
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Somebody second?
Yeah, second those, Chair.
That was Councillor Bates. Thank you very much. When I get a chance, they'll send them to me and I'll sign them as a correct record. So item 4, this is an item that the committee did discuss previously, and it's gone to the Cabinet, and I'm wondering if Councillor Jennings is with us.
I am, Chair.
Welcome back to the committee, Councillor Jennings. Do you want to tell us where we're up to with this?
Absolutely. So obviously members will know that it's gone to Cabinet and was formally approved, and certainly was well received there, particularly in terms of the comments that you shared, Steve, into why we spent so long looking to get this right and looking to move this forward. You know, this is about ensuring that we've got the right elements in our town centre, particularly in regards to green spaces, and also bringing in some of those opportunities such as living walls and green walls, which we watched and discussed at this committee. So I think it shows that, you know, policy committees can push things through. We can have good debates and discussions and push forward agendas and policies, which will be taken forward by the Cabinet, and certainly within my portfolio as well as others, as this is kind of multifaceted. This will be now moving forward. And crucially, it's about ensuring that not only do we have a great and green place to live in the town centre, but particularly around the tenor research, it's about ensuring that we've got the right kind of housing, not just for young people, but for all the inhabitants of our town centre, making sure that it's affordable, that it's a great place to live, work, and be curious in as well. So I'll ultimately leave it there and pass over to John Laverick to kind of give a more tangible update in terms of what the timescales are and ultimately what we're moving forward with. But ultimately to thank the committee certainly for the work involved over the last 2 years to move this forward and put it firmly on the agenda.
Thank you. John, I didn't introduce you at the start. Do you want to explain who you are?
Yeah, John Laverick, Head of Regen Development and Housing for Warrington Council and Growth Directorate. So 2 elements here that Tom's touched on. First is tenure research, which is about right numbers of right housing product, particularly within the town centre. We're looking to combine that piece of work with the current housing needs assessment, which is a more borough-wide piece of work, so that we don't sort of lose ourselves down any gaps between what's happening borough-wide and what's happening town centre, and really to try and get a very good grip on what demand really looks like in the town centre. So that's being carried out by 2 agents that we will, commercial agents, that one has been appointed, one will be appointed, and we're hoping to have that as a comprehensive piece of work with the housing needs assessment. On urban greening, that's more around how we look at master planning various parts of the town centre and how they come forward in various planning applications. So a bit of a touchstone, if you like, to assess planning applications, particularly larger planning applications, on how that that green infrastructure around the town is accessible to people, how they can use it, how it joins up, and how it works with cycling and walking in particularly. So I think that's all I really wanted to update on that, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions, members? Can't see anybody indicating. If you're wanting to say something but you haven't managed to indicate.
Yeah, if I can have a say,
Councillor Froggatt, yes.
Yeah, I'm pleased that this has gone ahead, and under Tom's chairmanship, the committee were able to push it further. But it has been on the mind of people for many years, and I'm just wondering, how are you going to rescue some of the projects which are already there before we had this urban greening fully on the agenda? And I'm thinking of John Street and Latchford, you know, by the Ship Canal, and there are 2 projects. So there don't seem to be much urban greening there. I'm just wondering how we're going to rescue that situation.
John or Steve want to?
John, would you like me to take that?
I'm quite happy to respond if you wish. So obviously with developments that have already gone and being developed, difficult to actually do anything with the developments themselves. What I would like to see is how we link those. I touched on first and last mile, and also the ability to use much more cycling and walking and link up green spaces elsewhere in the town centre. So I think the things that are fixed, but I think we can make those fixed things, those developments that are already underway, far more joined into and linked into other green spaces that we bring forward. So, you know, we can't wind back the clock, but what we can do is learn lessons from them, and that's how I'd like to try and deal with that, really.
Thank you.
Councillor Barr.
Yes, I share Colin's concern, and not just for developments which are currently under construction, but ones which are going through the outline planning permission stage. The 2 I can think of are Grafton Hall Hayes. Now, Grafton Hall Hayes is an interesting one because it's in a rural setting, and actually the green context is quite well considered by the developers there, although there is some controversy as to the housing style aisles they want. But they've thought about walking, they've thought about access to green space, they've thought about how people will live there and will experience the green aspects of Grafton Hall. By contrast, and again I need to be careful because I'm on DMC and this is coming up on Wednesday, but I must say that so far the Slushers Lane development is very disappointing from a green point of view. A couple of pocket parks and a few trees along the waterfront, but not really a particularly green neighbourhood joined up to our our green areas, just a very, very dense housing area. I'm worried that we'll be shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted in terms of greening. Also, just one more thing. I mean, I know that David Boyer's on the call, and David Boyer's concerned that he can't afford and the money isn't there to maintain the green spaces and the green infrastructure we already have around various parts of the town. Yet we're proposing, and this scheme will propose, to have more of it. Now, my view is that Warrington has far too few street trees. I think David's point of view is, from an aesthetic point of view, he probably agrees it's got too few street trees. From an economic point of view, we've got far too many street trees because they're simply too expensive to look after. And also, Tom mentioned green walls. It's interesting that on a site adjacent to a site in which Warrington will have an interest in Salford, a complete green wall office block is going up. We've got nothing as radical as that coming up here in Manchester, so in Warrington. And also, there's other aspects of greening, which is helping residents, particularly in the town centre, to have things like balconies, things like small front gardens, things like back gardens, bits of amenity space where they can contribute to the greening and hopefully will maintain it themselves. So I'm looking forward to this piece of work. I think it's really important, but I hope we don't miss out on some major developments because this work hasn't been completed yet.
Thank you. I think we probably share the view of mistakes in the past and not allowing for this sort of stuff, but either John or Steve want to respond again?
Quite happy to respond on that. I hear exactly what you're saying, Bob. Some of these developments have not really dealt with this accessibility to green space properly. Some are done, some are in process. Some we can do things about, some we can't. So, you know, we deal in the art of the possible, really. If we can influence, we will influence, particularly in light of this confirmation from Cabinet that urban greening is something we really want to put into the town centre developments.
Thank you, John.
Okay, I think for those of us on Development Management Committee, we're also aware that developers are quite keen on talking about viability issues, so they don't have to provide affordable homes, and of course the more green space they have to provide, that affects viability as well. So it's not going to be an easy sell, I don't think, in some cases, but we're looking at the policy and hopefully we'll get it right in the future. Anybody else before we move on to the next item? If anybody wants a bit of light entertainment on the subject of greening walls, I would recommend you look at the 100th Wasser house in Austria, where you've got trees actually growing out of the buildings. So enjoy that one. Item 5 then, and that's a Brexit update. And that's Steve Park again.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Park, I'm Director of Growth at the Council. So I've brought this report to committee, given the recent exit and the finalisation to an extent of the negotiations that concluded December 31st, albeit as I set out in the report in section 3.1, you'll note that the trade and cooperation agreement was due to complete with EU this month, and that has now been extended in the last 24 hours to the end of April to allow MEPs to have further scrutiny of that agreement. Notwithstanding that, the report sets out a general synopsis, and I think it would be fair to say that it is still a little early to see a direct impact of a material impact of Brexit on the Warrington economy. Having said that, there are a number of matters that I thought members would benefit from some insight into, particularly some ongoing worries in relation to workers' rights, and I make an important point there in section 3.7 with a motion that was tabled in the House and agreed by all parties in January of this year in relation to protecting workers' rights. State aid is a very important instrument, and it's been a historically important instrument of government in Warrington, particularly in some of the sectors involved in nuclear and life science research. It was certainly a sticking point in the negotiations. There are still provisions in place. It is different. It is still emerging, but the idea of subsidy control prevails, and it's something that we need to keep our eye on and make sure that we support our economy in the best way possible when it comes to interpreting some of the legislation. We'll be certainly doing that through our colleagues at the Chamber of Commerce. Fisheries not directly impacted in the Warrington economy, save for a couple of reasonable sized businesses we have in the Woolston and Birchwood area involved in seafood processing, but there is a well publicised set of difficulties that the fishing industry is experiencing, and as I said, that's not having a direct impact at this stage on our economy. And again, there's been much press interest in the inland border facility in Appleton, where we were expecting the possibility of 800 vehicles per day. Thankfully, that has seen much less activity, and we're expecting around, and we're seeing around 30 vehicles per day. So we're continuing to monitor that, but thankfully it's not turned out to be as horrific as we thought it might have been. Business administration is something that we are getting a lot of feedback on. Businesses, in part, it's part of the learning process for them, but I think there is a general consensus that there is now a material increase in paperwork needed to ship products around our EU partners, and the Road Haulage Association in particular has made representations in this respect. I've put a section in there on some of the trade deals and the hopefully the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we're looking to join, and that will have a benefit to the economy in due course. And again, EU structural funds was something that benefited Warrington over the years and no longer in place. However, that is to be replaced by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, the prospectus of which is still to be announced from government. We're expecting that in the spring of this year, but we are led to believe that that could be up to £1.5 billion per year. So we're working very closely with the local enterprise partnership to make sure that we have a good number of oven-ready schemes good to go as and when that fund becomes available. And just as a national economic outlook to finish off, the Combined Authority in Liverpool progressed a bid for a free port recently. That doesn't include at this stage any sites in Warrington, but we will monitor that as to whether there's an opportunity in due course. The Levelling Up Fund, we are expecting the prospectus to come out. We were expecting it in January. We were then expecting it this month. There's no sign of it at present, but we're hoping that prospectus for that will come out in March. And again, working closely with Dave Boyer and the Environment and Transport Directorate, we are certain to have a good number of oven-ready schemes ready to work with the LEP and our MPs in the north and the south on that matter. Trying to draw a conclusion as to where we are in relation to Brexit has been made more difficult. There's two notable geopolitical in some respects, but certainly geoeconomic changes that have been ongoing really. COVID needs no further explanation, and the effect that that has had on world economies, and the oil price as well. And the oil price in particular, Brent crude was at $60 a barrel roughly this time last year. It fell rapidly to less than $20 a barrel in May of last year, and is now back to above $60 a barrel. So oil price volatility on that scale in a 12-month period has a tremendous impact on planning for national economies, and we've seen that in the UK economy, and that will eventually feed through to the Warrington economy as well. Whether that's positive or negative, of course, time will tell. So it's a little too early to draw any conclusions. There are a number of other matters around COVID and, as I said, oil prices that need to be brought into consideration. And it's perhaps something, Chair, that with your permission we could bring back to a future committee when we may see a little bit more, particularly in relation to UK Shared Prosperity Funds and Levelling Up Fund. And with that, I'll invite questions.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I think the the diversion of these structural funds into Shared Prosperity Fund and the levelling up, whether they coordinate with each other, because of course the structural funds largely went to the areas which need levelling up. So we do need to make sure that happens. Can I say, I thought you were a bit optimistic in saying that talk about the finalisation of negotiations, because it sounds like we're really just starting. I've got Councillor Bates wanted to speak. Councillor Bates.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And to comment on the question, if I may. First of all, Steve, you mentioned the internal, the inland border facility, I should say. And just a comment, really. I know you mentioned in your report there that the usage, the volumes of traffic has been a lot lower than anticipated. But just a comment, really, a positive comment to you and to Steve Hunter, who I know is on the call, and to all of your colleagues who've worked with residents and also councillors for Appleton Thorne and the wider South Wellington area. I think that's been incredibly well managed. And a lot of work went into mitigating for an unknown volume of traffic. So thanks in particular to Steve Hunter and his team, and I know the residents are really appreciative for the level of support and also the time that Steve's personally given to meeting with councillors and residents about that, and I hope that continues into the future. So that was the comment. You mentioned also the kind of the bureaucratic breaks which Brexit is putting on a lot of logistics firms in particular, and I was listening to something the other day about the quite significant downturn in the amount of cross-channel trade because of the documentation. I was just wondering if we had any sense of the direct impact on Warrington's logistics firms yet. We do kind of pride ourselves, rightly or wrongly, on being at the centre of everything, and that's a big play for logistics firms. But what is the impact on Warrington firms where trucks are going to Europe and coming back empty, and vice versa? That seems very dodgy for commercial and environmental grounds. But just any thought on Warrington firms in particular, Steve?
Well, it's hard to put a figure on it, Ryan, at the moment. We are working with the Chamber of Commerce and with the Business Growth Hub at the LEP on an intelligence gathering exercise, which is still to conclude. And I think there's two matters really. There's one is the speed with which product is getting around, around the world, but in particularly across the channel, as you point out. The other is the sheer cost of shipping from the Far East. The container costs, which I point out in the report there, have gone up tenfold, and that is being passed on, will ultimately be passed on in part to the supply chain, but ultimately to the consumer. And I think we are perhaps in a 6-month lag of that hitting potentially our IPI as a nation. So we're going to have to monitor it carefully. At the moment, anybody involved in logistics, and as I make point in the report, the Road Haulage Association have lobbied strongly with government to make sure they are acutely aware of the difficulties that businesses in the logistics sector are experiencing in relation to increased administration, but not just the administration, actually the time it takes on just-in-time stock and logistics management and the impact that's having. Aggravated further, of course, still with COVID, where people are spending more time at home, shopping online, and putting further pressure on the logistics sector. So, I would be very, very surprised if our economy wasn't being impacted by it, but the extent of that impact is something that we need to wait on the outcome of some work that the Local Enterprise Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce are working on, and we'll be able to report that back in due course, if that's okay.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Bates?
Yeah, thanks for that. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Froggatt.
Yes. I was thinking of the base that was built on European money, and there were certain stipulations of when it was built, what it had to be used for, the kind of lettings we should have. Do those stipulations still exist, or could we broaden our appeal with the base?
I don't think it changes the stipulations set out in those in the use of the funds in the first instance. And secondly, we've built a community at the base of engineering, software, IT, manufacturing, consulting, and that community is obviously been impacted by COVID, like every office has, and there's nothing new in that. But we have developed a good community in that building, and we'll go from strength to strength. And I'm sure when the COVID restrictions lift properly in June of this year. So I think that's still to be tested legally, if I'm honest, Colin. And it's not just a Warrington thing. I think the fact that those funds were used subject to conditions, I think those conditions remain in place for some time to come. But nevertheless, it is a use that, as a council, we still think it's worthwhile pursuing as an office development.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barr. I can't hear you, Bob. Are you muted or you?
Is that better? Right. Right. A couple of questions for Steve. One on the Prosperity Fund. That 1.5 billion. I'm just looking it up. I'm getting a figure of 1.2 billion over 7 years. Now, I've been trying to look for a comparable figure for ERDF funding. It sounds as though in the last 7 years cycle we had about 10 times as much ERDF funding as that, about 15 billion. So, am I getting the numbers wrong, or is the Prosperity Fund going to be a very, very, very thin version of what was available under ERDF?
I don't think it's a like-for-like swap, if that answers your question. The extent to which it's thinner compared to existing ERDF, I think time will tell. I've got a figure of 1.5 that I'm working on with the letter. You're seeing 1.2, others will be seeing more. Yeah. We need that.
Can I just confirm that 1.5 is over 7 years?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds quite good when you say 1.5. It doesn't sound quite so good when you say it's what's it, 200 million a year.
The report says 1.5 billion per year.
The government paper says it's a 1.2 billion portfolio of programs over 7 years.
I think it's per year, but it's
is it?
But it's a 7-year program. Is the point I was making.
Right. Oh, okay, so that means that would make it about half of the RDF rather than a tenth, yes. Which is certainly a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not as good.
Yeah.
Still not as good.
Second question. There's a lot of report in the press about small businesses and small exporters who are no longer finding it cost effective to sell into Europe. Are we aware of businesses in Warrington which are losing out in that way?
I think this goes back to the point I was making earlier, where we're trying to establish some intelligence across not just Warrington, but the Cheshire East and Cheshire West economies from those businesses that are having difficulties in that respect. And some of them, of course, are impacted by COVID. I expect within the next 8 weeks, we'll have some of that intelligence picture back in our hands, and we'll be able to target some of those businesses. Unfortunately, we just don't have that information right now.
Right. And also, we can, of course, hope that Lord Frost may renegotiate a situation for those companies which is a little bit closer to what they experienced in the past rather than what they're experiencing now. No need to comment on that.
Sorry.
Okay, cheers. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
I'm going to be naughty and talk about Lord Frost as an unelected bureaucrat now running in the cabinet. So that's can't resist the temptation, I'm afraid. People happy to note that report, and we move on to item 6, and a very special welcome to Stephen Fitzsimons, who's the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Commerce. It's your report, Stephen. Off you go.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. It's good to be back. I think I've only missed one of these. Yeah, so I'm on to comment for a couple of years at the Chamber, so I've written a paper. I'm just going to pick up on a few points and explain and outline how that is going to work in practice over the next 2 years. I'll touch on the history first of all, because if you remember, we've spoken about it at the Policy Committee in the past. We launched the Business Exchange through Warrington & Co. back in the spring of 2018, and it was quickly very successful, becoming the largest membership organisation in the town with just over 200 members. Key activities included the annual conference back in 2019, which was absolutely fantastic. We had the Shadow Business Minister came along to that, and a number of businesses presenting Women in Business, we had over 100, and Councillor Cathy Mitchell, she hosted that one for us. And then the Christmas meals, very popular as well, so we had 2 or 3 of those. So it was performing really strongly, the Business Exchange. By contrast, the Chamber clearly has got the longevity, established in 1876, very good at delivering export documentation. However, safe to say that it was less active on the networking scene. So both organisations working quite in isolation of each other. And then, of course, 2020 happened, and it was a dreadful year for more reasons than one, but certainly for the 2 organisations, face-to-face meetings were first of all constricted and then restricted. And when you're trying to develop business face-to-face, which is what the Business Exchange is about in particular, that became increasingly more difficult. Then, of course, sadly, we had the illness and then the passing of the Chief Executive, Colin Daniels. So really was a year to forget, 2020. What it did do was encourage us to start thinking more differently, and this was the business-facing organisations across Warrington, including Warrington and Co. Because, yeah, I spoke about the Business Exchange, great at delivering events, and had managed to attract a strong cohort of smaller companies. The Chamber, fantastic internationally, you know, clearly that longevity that I mentioned, and also had a number, or has a number, of large companies in membership, the likes of New Balance, European Metal Recycling, just outside Warrington, Nichols, who've got the ever popular Vimto, of course, so bigger brands in membership. So we came together and had a chat about, well, what was the most effective way and what would businesses appreciate? What would they appreciate? And we decided that it would be better if they worked together rather than apart. And that's what we've been doing since the 1st of January. It's not been easy. Both organisations have lost members, although thankfully they are demonstrating modest growth once more. So that's good to see. The Chamber is now working closely with the local enterprise partnership, and this is something that hadn't really been happening in the past, and actually earned some revenue based on collecting some of that EU transition data that Steve Park's just been talking about. The Business Exchange has been one of the few organisations that has managed to continue being successful online. A Monday Zoom call, very, very popular, keeping people enthused and motivated, and also some thematic events as well. So frustrating not to have the big ticket events, but nevertheless Jackie Empson has done really well at just maintaining that key cohort of members. How it's going to work in the future? Well, they still need to be very ambitious. I've mentioned this figure before. There are 9,500 registered companies in Warrington. It is very successful. So both organisations collectively and individually need to have more of those organisations in membership, so that when people come asking for intelligence, then we've got that at our fingertips. One thing that will happen, and it will involve different brands, but I'll be involved in this, is the account management of those strategic companies. A couple of years ago, we had some investor development, as we call it, using an organisation called Mickledore, which is working really well. However, we had to give that up through cost-cutting measures, and we've been making do over the last few years, seeing some of the larger companies, but not having that comprehensive plan in place. So that will return, because we have got this this setup now moving forward. Similarly, within investment, so I'll still be involved in this, working with Warrington & Co, using the Warrington & Co brand. We've had some positive inquiries already come through Inward Investment, even though we've had that horrible year, as I mentioned. So we'll all come together and just make sure that the one face to business is joined up, and that's the most important thing. How will businesses receive that service? Jackie Empson and I, we used to having different hats. So we are council officers for the next 2 years on secondment, so we may well be doing some council business on occasion. It might be Warrington & Co. The property review, it was online last year, it'll be online again this year, but when we get back to having face-to-face, we'll both be involved in that. And then the Chamber hat will be put on for other things, as will the Business Exchange. And I think there's quite a good example that we're working on at the moment, because we've got the Rugby League World Cup coming up, and we're delighted to be hosting Papua New Guinea. I had a really exciting conversation with the British High Commissioner in Papua New Guinea. Sadly, couldn't fly there, so I had to be online, of course. But we're looking to do a bit of a PR handshake. I've got a couple of signed Wolves shirts here at home to send, and some bits and pieces of local produce. So we're going to make a real big deal of just having that that handover, if you like, to P&G, welcoming them ahead of coming here later on in the year. That intelligence gathering will continue. So Steve Park spoke about Brexit. Yeah, we've got other stories that have come through the chamber. Just to pick up one of the questions from Councillor Bate there about the distribution companies. Distribution companies in North Warrington been very successful there, 10,000 new jobs over the last 5 years. They tend to service a local national market, so they haven't been too badly affected. However, those who are sending stuff, particularly over the Irish Sea, they come back with empty containers. It's costing more, it is taking longer, so we have got some of that intelligence on board. And we will continue to work closely with Warrington & Co and the LEP in feeding in that intelligence, because if you look at some of the volumes at the chamber, export certificates were down in December. We were expecting them to be up in January. They still haven't seen that recovery. So we're hoping that this is a blip rather than a permanent fixture. That said, the British Chamber of Commerce nationally, they had a survey a couple of weeks ago, 1,000 of their members, and 49% said that they were having issues, and most of them said they were expecting that to be permanent rather than temporary. So we are concerned and watching the situation carefully. So yes, it's a 2 years to comment. We'll work really hard over the next 2 years to make this work, one face to business, and we'll see how we get on. And we'll look forward to be working very closely with all of you. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening. Has anybody got any questions?
Nobody's indicating at the moment.
I'm used to that response. So if anybody wants to speak to me afterwards or later on in the week, then just drop me a line. We're delighted to have that chat.
Yeah.
Councillor Barr will.
Right, thank you, Stephen. That's very helpful. One of the things that I was always aware of was that the Warrington Chamber was very different to the St Helens Chamber, and the St Helens Chamber was quite heavily involved in the development of youth training schemes, of apprenticeships, and of linking up between young people and local businesses. Now, what we're hearing nationally is that the age group that's suffering most from COVID and most sensitivity in terms of having lost their jobs are those 20-somethings. Is the Chamber going to be able to do something to try to encourage local businesses to provide training opportunities, hopefully turning into longer-term opportunities for people in that younger age group?
Definitely, Bob, and Eleanor Blackburn may well come on to this. One of the initiatives that we've been signposting Chamber and Business Exchange members towards is the Kickstart Initiative. So this is trying to employ people in that 16 to 24-year-old age bracket. We've had 3 cohorts through Warrington & Co. So this is 90 young people who've taken advantage of it already. We'll continue to do that, as in we, Warrington & Co, for the next 18 months. So we've seen some success there. There's still the ambition, Bob, of course, to get younger people into apprenticeships and employment. We've got the Jobs and Employment Fair coming up, which is normally at Birchwood. So we had 900 came along to this last year, 900 children and parents came along. Again, it's virtual, but there's some really clever technology to make that work effectively. Because it is, particularly when you look at the engineering sector, we know there are about, 6,000 people in advanced engineering, particularly the nuclear sector at Birchwood, 20,000 people in the wider Birchwood community. If we don't service the next generation, if we don't inspire and infuse the next generation, then there could be drift if we're not careful. So that's why we work really hard on apprenticeships, on graduates, and making sure that that talent pool continues for the future. And I would say it's a bit frustrating looking over the fence at St Helens sometimes. To put it into context, Warrington Chamber's got 3 members of staff. St Helens has got 100 because they have taken on all those services over the recent past. So the long-term aspiration is for us collectively to start looking, well, what's right for the town? What can the Chamber get involved in? Because without trying to sound too conceited or arrogant, coming back to my point at the start, Warrington is a very economically strong town, certainly was before COVID and will be again. Highest levels of employment of anywhere in the north, highest levels of GVA, gross value added. So we need to build upon that and stand up for ourselves and have a strong chamber, have a strong business exchange, and really support that business community, because it is one of the success stories across the north.
That's very helpful, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I hear you right, Stephen? Though that of the members you've got, some are already experiencing problems. You mentioned going to Ireland.
Yeah, so we're seeing the paperwork, one food and drink company that I spoke to, Steve, early on. And you could argue that it was their fault partly for not being prepared because they just ignored some of the guidance to tell them to be ready. So when it came to the 4th of January, that first shipment just wasn't accepted. They couldn't do anything about it. And then they found that the freight forwarding companies, the shipping companies, just weren't picking up the telephone because they were so busy trying to support companies. And then I think if you look at the environmental aspect, the fact that there are containers going over to Ireland, normally they would come back with product from Ireland to be sold into Britain. Then that would be sold in Britain and would continue over onto the continent. So we're seeing that it's more of a one-way flow and containers are coming back empty because companies are concerned about the paperwork and they're thinking, if I get the paperwork right going over to Ireland and I don't risk it by having a shipment coming back, there's more chance of it being successful. So we are having some of those stories. I'll give you one more, if I may. We've had a couple of companies who they don't make anything in the UK, so they do import items from overseas. Because those items are made overseas, that's where they are, where they do get involved in a tariff, VAT and custom situation by then exporting it further into the European Union. So at the moment, the fulfillment of those products, and this is 2 companies that I've spoken to, the fulfillment, i.e. the distribution, the packing, was done in the UK. Those 2 operations are now going to have to be done on the continent to try and avoid some of this bureaucracy. So great for, I think one of them might be going to Lithuania, great for the local working population over there, not so good for the UK, so because we are going to lose those jobs.
I understand we might lose some of the, I'm sure it's a good thing or a bad thing, we lose some of the HGVs on the motorways as they're going direct in ships from Ireland direct to the EU now. So
yeah, and again, coming back to Councillor Bates' question from earlier, so we know that volumes are down at Holyhead. It was about 45–50%. It is starting to recover a little bit, but it is, even if we might not like seeing the HGVs on there, again, it comes back to my point about at least they are bringing stuff back, so you're not just going on that one-way journey. So I'm sure we'll see a whole new environment, and hopefully it will settle down, and the environmental angle will be taken more seriously than it has done in the past.
Thank you. With the transport CAFs on the way to Felixstowe that suffer, I guess, but thank you. Has any other members got anything, or can we just note that now and thank Stephen for his report?
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Abbey.
Yes, Alex.
Just some anecdotal data from the companies that I work with. We work with Ireland quite a lot. One of my companies does. We import eggs from the north and the south of Ireland, and the level of bureaucracy on that side, importing back over here, is beyond expensive. So to give you an example, if you're a major egg packer in the UK, you might get eggs from 7 or 8 different farms. Each of those farms has to have a certificate. So if those eggs go onto a pallet, the same pallet, those vet certificates all have to be for that pallet. So you might need 7 or 8 certificates for one pallet. £180. It makes it to run in that way. So we're already seeing companies that are refusing to take products from certain places and export or import it due to the increasing cost from Brexit. The second one is a small company, like the gentleman just said, exports face cleaning equipment for makeup to the EU. They have to be VAT registered in every single country. Certain countries in the EU, France and Spain, for example, you have to be resident to have a VAT number. So you have to have a physical presence in those countries to export your product there, even if it's only a single product. So there is another incurred cost of Brexit. And in terms of transport, the 30 or so inland freight border things at Appleton Thorn, when Holyhead gets back up to speed, if it ever gets back up to speed, may well be back up to somewhere near the numbers we were going to be expecting. This hasn't even started yet. Brexit the impact hasn't even started to be felt, because I feel COVID is already masked over a lot of the pain that we were going to have been feeling. But I know economically for my businesses and the people that I deal with, it is having a significant impact on the way that they do business, and will impact directly on food and farming in the UK, and particularly around Warrington, for a long time to come, far outstripping any benefits we've got from leaving. That's just anecdotal from what I'm already seeing. How are we going to support these businesses who can't get the VAT right in these different countries? How are we going to support those small and medium enterprise businesses who work on a shoestring and are growing, but have now been stifled from this level of bureaucracy that just isn't possible to overcome because they don't have the funds?
Well, thank you for that. In the absence of any other comments, we're happy to note the reports, and if Stephen wants to leave us, he may. And we move to item 7, which is strategic infrastructure and transport. Who's David, is it?
Yeah, it is. I'm starting, Councillor Parish. I'm going to start, and then my colleague Steve Hunter, who you've already introduced, is going to take the rail issues. Obviously, members, you've got the report in front of you, so I won't take you through that line for line, but if you indulge me, I maybe just highlight a few issues or a few pointers on the sort of highways transportation side. Obviously, a lot of investment continues around Amiga, and you've got an update on all the various phases there. You know, particularly we've started what was phase 1. Like I think I've said this in the previous briefing, that when we first did these phases, when we first were planning these works out, we weren't exactly sure what order they would come in. So phase 1 has only just commenced now, which is after 2 of the previous phases, phase 2 and phase 3. But that is on site now and is progressing well. Another project there, which is just finished, is phase 3B, which is the Whittle Avenue, Lingley Green Avenue roundabout improvements, and that was completed in just before Christmas. Again, I think I've said before, you know, COVID did have some impact on some of our projects. There was some delay, particularly with the smaller contractors, but all those projects are now fully underway and completed, so that's good news. I'll just take you on to page 27 there, Centre Part Link. The Centre Part Link is nearly finished. We're literally doing the finishing touches, some servicing, some tie-ins. Slight delay on that project, but again, the contractor continued work substantially throughout the last 12 months. At times they had some problems more with the supply chain, but thankfully that's virtually finished now, and we look to open that in early March. The other project, which is our largest road scheme, is the Western Link, and again we have continued with that in the last 12 months. That's design work, all the statutory processes. In particular, we did a consultation on the run up before Christmas. It closed on the 23rd of December, and that was to help give us the final information in respect to submission of a planning application. Specifically, it was to look at some of the design changes that has occurred since OBC, the outline business case, was approved by the Department for Transport. We look to submit that planning application in late spring and summer. So good progress continues to be made with the Western Link. Obviously, we've spoken before at this policy committee about the local transport plan, and in particular this absolute objective of this transformational change. And key to this is strategic cycle improvements. One project which I'm very pleased is completed, or again literally the final finishing touches are being done, is the Amiga to Burton Wood accessibility improvements, and it is good to see that finished. Again, I'm sure councillors in the call will remember that it was one of Councillor O'Neill's projects which he was very keen to take forward, and obviously sadly Councillor O'Neill isn't here to see that finished. What we are intending to do when it's covertly safe to do that is we are going to name that link after Councillor O'Neill. We certainly think that's a fitting tribute to him. Just over on your next page, the councillors, there's 2 other important cycle improvements, and that is on Chester Road and a further upgrade on the Trans Pennell Trail. So both of those, Chester Road started recently, and as the Trans Pennell Trail that actually started in January. So both of those projects are now underway. For myself, just one final little bit of information, and that's on future scheme development. You know, one of the things we have been really successful in Warrington is developing what is a government expression, shovel-ready schemes. But in order to do that, you need to do your studies, you need to determine your schemes, you start developing your business cases. One of the key ones which we are doing is the first and last mile, and John Laverick before made reference to that in his answer to a couple of questions. Really important scheme that's looking at that inner 1 mile to and from the town centre and how we can improve sustainable links in there. Another key project and study we're looking at is local walking and infrastructure improvements. And again, those are very important because not only will they help inform the LTP schemes, but also, as I said, will inform projects which, when government funding becomes available, we'll be able to bid in for. Just the last one, though, just to make reference to, would be the bus priority mass transit study. The other key element of our LTP is to encourage that public transport usage. Obviously, public transport usage has been severely hit during the last 12 months. And certainly one of the key things we're going to be doing, both medium term, but in particularly short term, is working, you know, particularly with WOB and other bus operators, obviously, but particularly with WOB, our main operator, to get that patronage back onto the buses. So that's some quick headlines. And now I'll pass over to Steve Hunter, who will take you through some of the heavy rail matters. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. Just turning on to page 31 of the pack on all matters HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail. Obviously, report there. There's obviously been a lot of developments in that recently. The council remains opposed to the Goulburn link, and we've maintained that position throughout. Actually, I just draw attention to the second bullet point in that section. When the government announced revised safeguarding for the route of the Goulburn link, we were successful at getting Wigshaw Lane reinstated. It was previously proposed to be severed, and also the route has moved around 70 metres further away from Hollins Green as well. Actually, those two improvements are now confirmed following revised safeguarding that was published by the government last October. We continue to take that two-pronged approach. We oppose the Goulburn link, but if it does ultimately happen, then obviously, we to continue to negotiate with HS2 and certainly involve local ward councillors, parish councils, and the groups that have been formed against that route, and we look to secure the best possible mitigation in terms of that route should it happen. Moving on to the Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2 in combination, the government at the moment is in the final throes of producing what's called an integrated rail plan for the Midlands and the north of England, and we understand that potentially that was originally due to be published before the end of 2020. We now believe that will come out next month. And that will look at the phasing and the delivery of all aspects of HS2 from Crewe northwards in terms of phase 2B and also the eastern leg from Birmingham to Leeds. It will also look at all aspects of Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is formerly known as HS3, which is aimed at producing a transformational change in connectivity and journey times, in capacity and reliability of rail services across the north of England, connecting Liverpool to Warrington, to Manchester Airport, Manchester Piccadilly, and across the Pennines to Leeds, Sheffield, Hull, and Newcastle. We are lobbying very hard for that route to be of the highest possible standard, to go through Warrington, to connect HS2 through Warrington to Liverpool, and we await the outcome of that integrated rail plan next month. As has been reported in the media, we've got Councillor Mundry is our representative on Transport for the North's members board, and I provide him with support on the officers executive board, and I think it's been the subject of some publicity in the local media in the last week or so. It was agreed at the meeting last week that Transport for the North's strategic outline case on Northern Powerhouse Rail will actually now wait and take on board the outcome of this integrated rail plan in March. So that strategic outline case was originally meant to come out next month, but it will now need to take on board what is said in that integrated rail plan going forward. So you know, we've been lobbying very heavily for, say, for Warrington to get that best possible connection out of Northern Powerhouse Rail. And then moving on to page 32 of the papers, that's part of, Councillor Mundry obviously representing Warrington excellently as one of 20 local transport authorities on Transport for the North. We continue to play a very active role in Transport for the North in terms of looking to secure much greater levels of investment for transport and infrastructure in the north of England. In terms of wider rail matters, moving to the bottom of page 32 in the papers, something that is a very high priority for us at the moment is a consultation which is out at the moment, which is entitled the Manchester Recovery Task Force. That consultation was launched in January. It's an 8-week consultation which concludes 2 weeks today on the 10th of March. We're working very hard. We've had to go through a lot of detailed information on that. We've actually, Councillor Mundry has just written to the Department of Transport asking for an extension on that consultation because there's a lot of information that we need to go through in terms of that. But that is basically a culmination of the issues with the very severe levels of rail congestion through Manchester. For anyone in the meeting who's taken a train journey through Manchester, we know how difficult it can be to get through Deansgate, Manchester, Oxford Road and Piccadilly, and how congested that rail corridor is. It's actually designated nationally as a congested rail corridor, and long promised infrastructure improvements have not happened. And we had the main 2018 timetable situation where even more trains were put on to track that couldn't cope with that level of trains. So what's now being consulted on is to take some of those trains away from that in the short term. And the impacts on train service patterns from Warrington are quite significant, and it's certainly something that we are in the middle of preparing a very robust response, pushing back on some of those service changes. In particular, they're looking to split services on the Liverpool to Manchester via Warrington Central line, with a number of passengers from stations such as Padgate having to potentially change trains at Warrington Central, and also we are particularly concerned about the impact on both Warrington West and Birchwood stations, which play such a vital role in terms of serving the west and the east of the town with semi-fast express rail services to a number of destinations. So we're currently working through that, and we will be publicising our consultation response by the closing date in 2 weeks' time, and obviously we will be publicising that response and making our views very clearly known to the Department for Transport and Transport for the North. So, yeah, more than happy in combination with David to take any questions or comments on item 7.
Thank you, Stephen. In the interest of transparency, I should say I usually represent the council on the Transport for the North Scrutiny Committee as well. My impression is that these proposals, I don't know how aware you were of them while they were in preparation, but it looks to be in the interest of Transport for Greater Manchester, but not for many places beyond, because a lot of places will lose direct connection to the airport. And obviously it's part of the airport's planning consent that they try to encourage public transport use. So to lose a lot of trains to the airport won't go down well there. Nobody's indicating they want to speak on any of these topics.
Councillor Abbey.
Yes.
With regard to the Northern Powerhouse Rail, I've done a bit of digging because it comes very close to, well, I live in the village of Burtonwood, so it's going to come through land in Burtonwood, no matter which way it goes, whether it cuts back into Warrington or whether it goes direct out through Salford. How concrete are the chances of this being built is one question. And what sort of timeframes are the government looking at in terms of laying down track
Yep, I'm certainly happy to take that one. Councillor Abbey, the situation with Northern Powerhouse Rail at the moment is that it is a joint piece of work that's been taken forward by Transport for the North and the Department for Transport as co-clients, and they're at the stage where they are close to completing a strategic outline case for that Northern Powerhouse Rail route. As I touched on before, that was coming out in March, but it is now going to have to be delayed because to await the outcomes of the integrated rail plan. In terms of it serving Warrington and it connecting HS2 via Warrington to Liverpool, we will know more after the integrated rail plan in terms of the prospects of delivery of that and in terms of the timing of delivery of that. The best case is probably the late 2020s, early 2030s, or it could be later than that. It could be in the later part of the 2030s. We will know more after the integrated rail plan has come out. We're at the stage at the moment where there's still a number of route options under consideration. So I'm not in a position where I'm able to say any more about the specifics of those route options. But I will say that those route options are looking to serve a station in the centre of Warrington, and that the route is not intended to pass through Burton Wood. I can certainly say that much. It's definitely not passing through Burton Wood.
Right, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we just go back to Western Link? I mean, I think all parties have been asking for a second crossing of the ship canal at high level, other than Fell Wall and the Cantilever Bridge. So there's a bit of reaction against it, but I think historically we've been pressing for something like that for a long while. Representing a ward in the west of the town, I know there's some concern about traffic diverting from the Mersey Gateway, the tolls, but I think there will be some extra traffic on local roads, but I don't think there'll be much diversion, simply because the extra mileage will probably outweigh the tolls for ordinary traffic or for HGVs. But be interested to see about that. I know I was councillor for the Sankey Bridges area and was expecting a local roundabout, but that's not seemed to materialise yet. But I shall talk to officers about that. And I've got Councillor Barr indicating to speak.
Yes, question for Stephen Hunter, and again, this may be sort of sub judice, so he may not be able to tell me, but people in Lymm are very concerned about the NPR junction put aside for High Lee, which appears to assume a southern route through from Bank Quay or even on the old Fiddler's Ferry line. Is anything under consideration there? And if not, what's the purpose of that safeguarded area around High Lee for an NPR HS2 crossing?
Yep, thank you, Councillor Barr. In terms of the specifics of that, what the government undertook during 2019 was what's called a design refinement consultation on the HS2 Phase 2B route. HS2 as it stands is definitely happening from London to Birmingham. Royal assent was recently granted for the Birmingham to Crewe section, so it's definitely happening from London to Crewe. What is the next stage that would come after that is Phase 2B. As it stands at the moment, that would go from Crewe up past High Lee and use the Golborne link to connect with the West Coast Main Line, and a spur would come off that to go to Manchester Airport and into Manchester Piccadilly. At the point that spur goes off, there is a junction between the HS2 line going south to north and then the line going off to the east. What the government consulted on in 2019 was to make passive provision for a potential Northern Powerhouse rail connection to leave the HS2 route there and then head westwards towards Warrington and towards Liverpool. What the government then confirmed in its revised safeguarding directions in October 2020 was that it confirmed that HS2 route should make that passive provision in the event that Northern Powerhouse Rail happens. Now, as I say, all I can do beyond that is refer you to the answer that I gave to Councillor Abbey with the previous question. It's not at the stage where we can go into any more specifics. There are a number of routes under consideration, and that we need to wait for the integrated rail plan. We need to wait for Transport for the North and Department for Transport to come up with their strategic outline case, taking on board the integrated rail plan. All I would reassure members is that we are pushing hard for the best possible provision for Warrington.
Excellent. Thank you. That's helpful. Can you just remind me of the date that the integrated rail plan is due to be published?
The indications we've got is that civil servants have been given the instruction to get it ready for next month. Now, I know no more than that. Obviously that I think it will be ready to come out next month. Obviously, it will be in the government's gift, or whether it does choose to publish it next month or not. So our expectation is March, but of course we're in the government's hands.
That's helpful. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Some of us might think that it would have been better if the integrated rail plan had been informed by Transport for the North's proposals rather than the other way round, but we are where we are on that. So if there's no other questions on item 8, on item 7, I'll thank Stephen and David for their presentations, and presume we're happy to note that, and we move to item 8, which I think is going to be Steve Park again, is it? Or oh no, it's yeah, it's Steve, is it?
It's John Laverick.
I'll take
John
the
Laverick again. Okay, thank you, John.
So I'll just refer to the report as published, but would like to pick up a couple of points on it. First one, Times Square. Obviously, Times Square is the majority of it is closed at the moment, with the exception of some essential services from the market. But we are looking forward now that timetable's been issued for opening Times Square back up again. Warrington Market was extremely busy before lockdown, and all indications are that will happen again. We have 3 new operators to go into Times Square, as well as the recent announcement that the University of Chester is taking space in there. So looking like Times Square should hopefully bounce back extremely well once restrictions have been lifted. Bus depot relocation is going to programme at the moment, so we're going out for contractors for that in the next few weeks, and are hoping to keep to the timetable as published there of June 22 for the completion, and that allows the removal of the existing bus depot. Waterfront, Centre Park and Western Link we've touched on. Stadium Quarter really as written. Same with Cabinet Works. We are looking to get some further advice on Cabinet Works. It's an interesting and good opportunity, but quite a challenging site as to what we actually bring forward there. So we're just looking for some wider support in order to understand that. Banky Gateway, which is the area to the south of Wilson Patton Street up to Banky Station. Work has started on working out the best thing to do with that. And certainly in relation to the comments earlier on about urban greening and tenure response and the first and last mile, Banky Gateway is quite a big site, and really does provide us the opportunity to wire those in from the very start of the master planning exercise. So a good opportunity there. Local housing company has started to deliver its sites, which is good. Beatty and Dalham Hub, we were literally about to take that over in January. Has been hit by a flood. We are still waiting for insurers' response. It wasn't our site at the time, it was the contractor's site. So we're waiting for the insurer's response on that. But we're also looking with the contractor to learn lessons to make sure that if this does happen again, that we absolutely minimise the downtime for Beatty and Dalham Hub. It's an operational asset that will be operated by Livewire. Every week we have it out of commission, it would cost us money. So we're looking at ways to try and impact that. And last but no means least is there's obviously SPD, supplementary planning. document out for the town centre at the moment, which I know is being asked for consultation. So a quick rattle through there, but if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Nobody's indicating. Okay. Bob Ball again?
I am indicating, but it's just a quickie, and it's simply on the town centre supplementary planning document. Michael Bell put on a parish council's briefing, and I think he's going to repeat that on Tuesday night. I wanted to say that was extremely helpful. It clarified a lot about the SPD, and I think that we had a useful exchange of views there.
I think Steve will respond on that.
No, I'll thank you for that, Councillor Barr. I'll feed that back to Michael, and I will appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. The local plan will be obviously changing, shall we say. There's even more alterations in government guidance for housing, I understand, but that's not on our agenda tonight. Nothing else on this item, and I thank John for that, and again we note that. And item 9, Eleanor Blackburn, who's Head of Inclusive Growth and Partnerships. Eleanor.
Thanks very much, Chair. This is quite similar to the Brexit report in that it starts to introduce some of the headline oversights of the emerging impact of COVID on skills development, and then some of the emerging national, regional and local priorities that we've got. So it is quite a broad subject area, as the committee knows. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the report doesn't try to cover all sort of areas of training and learning needs of the whole of the Warrington population. So our focus here is very much on skills related to achieving or maintaining employment, or in work skills requirements that help around growth and business development. And we know that some groups, we've already touched on it this evening, we know that some groups have been more impacted than others. So young people have already been mentioned, but also some of our more vulnerable communities who perhaps have got additional support needs when it comes to learning, or don't have access to digital technology in their home, and we know that nationally that's been a real challenge, both for children but also for young adults, perhaps in the further education and higher education sector as well. I've picked out in the report some of the more high-profile sectors that we've heard about over recent months in the last year. So digital and tech, for example, health and social care, and more recently life sciences and research and pharmaceuticals. They are particularly high-profile throughout the COVID period, but that's not to say that other sectors aren't important and obviously haven't been impacted by COVID, and of course EU exit as well. They've all got sort of skills requirements, changing skill requirements. You've got some areas of growth that are still quite strong within the economy, but then other areas where we've seen a shrinkage because of COVID that was probably on the cards already, but COVID has really sped up that impact, for example, in retail. So I've started to go and pick out some of the emerging national priorities in section 4. We've very recently seen the government publish a new white paper, Skills for Life, Learning for Opportunity and Growth, quite long awaited. But I think generally speaking across the sector, it's been positively welcomed. The devil's always in the detail with this sort of thing, and there are some areas where detail is scarce and the sector are asking for more, for example, on funding, and also in terms of the timetable for the rolling out of some of the priorities that I've just picked out there in section 4.2. I think there's a feeling that we need to try and speed up in delivering some of these priorities. I've picked out again some of the Cheshire and Warrington emerging priorities, and this is both in terms of the overall economic recovery and then specifically on skills development as well. And you'll see there that things like, you know, young people as a target cohort, employees who are already in the workplace, but we need to sort of grow and innovate and adapt, are also a key priority. And then those that are economically inactive and unemployed as well. And that's right across the age range and right across the sort of needs of both Warrington people, but also obviously employers as well. And you know, some of the sort of key highlights right across the Cheshire and Warrington priorities is around being employer led. That's been really important for a number of years and will continue to be so, but we're also seeing priority areas such as environmental sustainability and inclusive economy coming much further to the front of the priority list, or the top of the priority list. Collaboration continues as a really important area as well, and that's also emphasised in the white paper, which is, again, it's been quite positively received. So locally, we're very much connected to these agendas, and in section 6 I've sort of highlighted the key categories, the 4 main areas in which we work. Partnership working and collaboration is very much at the heart of the work that we do within the employment support and skills section of the council. And again, you'll see that I've picked out some of the key projects and initiatives that we work on. We've got things like the Warrington Employment and Skills Action Group that's been running for a number of years, that brings together the whole swathe of different learning and skills providers that we've got across Warrington, together with key partners such as DWP and employers as well. Really important partnership function there. Employer and business connectivity has been incredibly important. It's something that we've worked quite hard over recent years to build up, and we've now got the pledge as well as a key LEP partner within that. And as Stephen mentioned earlier on, the annual apprenticeships and jobs fair, which is going to be taking place on the 3rd of March, so coming up very quickly. This year digital, as Stephen mentioned, and we've had real success with our digital offer in terms of jobs fairs and apprenticeship fairs in recent months. Which is something that's been positive and something that we can learn on and probably grow going forward. It's a way of something that's proven to engage young people very positively. I've picked up there on skills for employment, and the team do have a direct delivery role, as well as the sort of more coordinating and collaborative approach that we also take, and we are directly involved in delivering a number of programmes. So I've highlighted Journey First there, and Kickstart, which again was mentioned in relation to young people earlier. We've got a very strong offer in terms of employability skills. And we do this in a number of ways. Firstly, you know, looking out for those key initiatives and those key projects and government funding streams or EU funding streams that we've had, and making sure that we tap into those and work across the partnerships. But we also provide a free service around redundancies. So where we've got companies that unfortunately are going to have to make large redundancies, we are able to offer a sort of specific support package for their employees to make sure that they're as ready as they can be for the workplace. So I suppose in conclusion to all of that, you know, it's an emerging picture. We're not, you know, we can see some of the key industries where we've got potential for growth. We can see some of the key industries where we know that there's, for example, there's been high levels of furlough, and that might lead on to some areas of shrinkage in the economy. But it's something that we need to watch, and it's something that we need to keep a close eye on and keep analysing over the coming weeks and months. We are quite well placed to respond in Warrington. Again, I've picked out some of the key projects that we've already got in place around things like the town deal, for example. We've got those strong partnerships and we've got that delivery model that works quite well, but it is an unknown entity at the moment, and you know, something that we do need to keep a very close eye on. So again, Chair, possibly one to bring back to a future meeting when the picture is a little bit clearer.
Thank you, Eleanor. Yeah, but I'm not sure we've ever had a particular. We've looked at STEM subjects and the skills shortage there. I've become aware almost accidentally this week of whether we've actually particularly targeted girls and women to go into those subjects. Part reminder, because I've had, for different reasons, Zoom meetings this week with a retired engineer she's won't like to guess at her age, but she's been an engineer for a long time, and another young woman engineer in her 20s, and it does seem that it's an area where females could be encouraged, particularly not just engineering but all the STEM subjects, and I just wonder whether we might have something on that.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of number of initiatives around STEM and also STEAM as well, which is one of the other acronyms that sort of includes the arts subjects within that as well, and also very much linked into that as well, the digital and tech agenda as well. And again, this is where we're very well placed in Warrington, because we do have connectivity into local employers, and you know, as I say, we've built up that strong relationship. So we've got some great examples of projects where there's been connectivity directly between schools and employers. And you know, I've not got the detail, apologies, Steve, in terms of specifically targeting girls and women, but I can certainly bring some of that information back. But yeah, in terms of the way that we connect our employers with our schools, we've got a very strong offer, both in Warrington with some of the STEM companies that we've got, but also obviously across the wider Cheshire and Warrington footprint as well.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, I've not heard of STEAM before. It sounds, I mean, the whole STEM thing, it's the technical side of stuff. So throwing into the arts seems almost going against what STEM is.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject area. It's one that the Arts Council have been exploring for a number of years. There is some connectivity across certain subject areas where you've got that crossover between creativity and then obviously the more technical side of things. So one that springs to mind, for example, is architecture. Where you do need that combination of the creativity but also the more technical side of things as well. And I don't know, I think there's some engineers among us today, but there's certainly some crossover between creativity and engineering as well.
All in favour of creative engineering? Councillor Barr.
Just picking up your point about attracting women into STEM, there was a United Nations Women in Science Day, which I presume is an annual event on the 11th of February. I know because my daughter, who's a bioinformatician, was featured by the Science Park, where the company that she works for is based in County Durham. But we could do something as a council in actually celebrating such events and celebrating the successes of some of our young people who are already working in the STEM areas, because I think that would really strongly encourage others to come in. There's nothing like seeing someone interesting who's ended up with an interesting job that they've enjoyed and works in the town to encourage the next generation to come along.
I'm sure that's
yeah. I think that's a great suggestion, Councillor Blah. We can certainly pick that up.
Thank you. I was put in mind of that marvellous little film Hidden Figures, with all the women, notably black women in America, helping the NASA project before they actually had real computers, and they were the mathematicians doing the calculations there, and human computers. So yeah, things move on, but sometimes they never change either. So thank you for that. Eleanor. Anybody else got any questions? If not, I'll thank Eleanor for that, and again we'll note the report. Which takes us to our final item, which is the work programme, which is basically a list of stuff we've done rather than a programme for work to be done. So that we'll need to populate that with new things, particularly. Some may come out of this, but if anybody's got any particular suggestions of things they want us to cover, you can shout now or submit them to the officers in due course. Don't know if anybody's got anything in mind at the moment. We have got another meeting coming up fairly rapidly, getting in before the election at the end of March. So we can have that as a particular item on the agenda there, ideas for the future work programme. Someone want to come in? I'm not sure who's called.
Surely it'd be more appropriate to, given that there will be quite a large turnover of councillors, I suspect, in the elections, it seems to be a bit moot to be discussing a work programme for a committee that will not necessarily include all of us.
Oh, I don't know, Bob. I mean, you and the rest of the committee are the experienced ones, so it might be as well for them to set the agenda for people.
And then they can throw it out when they come in.
Who don't know, who are new to it. And if they don't like it,
I'm happy to do that.
If they don't like it, they can always change it, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Kath. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with what you said.
Thank you. I'm glad you managed to get into the meeting.
I did about 20 minutes into it. I did eventually. Oh. Yeah.
Very good. We can help you catch up on anything you missed. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no other councillors indicating and nothing else to be said, I want to thank the officers very much for all they've done tonight in getting the agenda together and helping us out this evening. Yep. And I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.